Everyone from the West Coast, and good, I guess, afternoon for everyone on the East Coast of Canada. Welcome to the CICE initial general intake for 2025. We'll be accepting applications from February 2025 to April 30th, 2025. While we do not have an exact amount of capital that will be committed to this call, I can assure you that this is our largest intake that we conduct every year at the BC Centre for Innovation and Clean Energy. We are not going to have a Q&A today. Hopefully all your questions will be answered in this webinar, but I would refer you to the FAQ on the CICE website, or you can email us if you have any questions at info@cice.ca. Next slide, please. So I'd like to take the time to properly acknowledge that we operate on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. Further to this acknowledgement, Indigenous participation and entrepreneurship is an entrenched part of CICE's funding programs. We seek active engagement and participation with First Nations communities as part of our organization and the companies in which we fund. Additionally, we focus on building strong Indigenous entrepreneurship in BC and the rest of Canada. And next slide, please. So I'm going to ask a poll question right now, asking where you are attending from during this webinar. So I'll just give you all some time to fill this out, and I'll give you about a minute for that. All right, so that was great. I can see that there are a lot of applicants in BC specifically, but also throughout Canada and some outside of Canada as well. So that is great to see in terms of participation in this webinar. So I just want to give you a brief outline of who we are at the BC Centre for Innovation and Clean Energy, also known as CICE. So we're an independent nonprofit focused on advancing the commercialization of companies with capital-intensive climate technologies to drive economic activity and emissions abatement. We were established in October of 2021. We began funding actually in June of 2022. And we are in our third year of funding of a 5-year fund life. We've allocated about $40 million of our $105 million raised that we manage. And our core funders include the BC government, the federal government, and Shell Canada. Next slide, please. So at CICE, we are driven by economic activity, our ability to successfully enable projects, and the equitable nature of our funding structure so that all stakeholders and right holders are participating in a path to net zero. From the 40 million contributed to organizations, we've been able to leverage about 280 million in capital. Our 59 funded projects are valued at $196 million and are expected to create just under 700 jobs, predominantly in British Columbia. Diversity is core to CICE's beliefs and reflected in our investment team, which includes diversity in thought and representation. 64% of our funded companies have underrepresented groups in positions of power and influence at their respective companies. 18% of our funded projects have Indigenous participation as an entrenched part of their operating and business model. And our projects have the potential to impact the abatement of 77% of BC emissions. Next slide, please. So here you can see a list of our companies. I'm not going to kind of go into a lot of detail on here, but you can see these are the companies that encompass our 59 projects. About 80% of our funding goes to startups. So you can see a large amount of startups that are within our portfolio. And yeah, next slide, please. And I'll be going through the CICE application mandate for this organization. Next slide, please. So CICE is not a fund for all innovation. We focus on GHG abatement of the hardest to abate sectors in BC and the rest of Canada. Very few squares in this path to net zero are dark purple, as you can see here, meaning more innovation and technology is needed to bring down costs and increase accessibility to unlock a true path to net zero. Simply put, none of us are getting to net zero with the current technology available. So you can see in this rectangular chart here that CICE is predominantly focused on the gray and light purple that needs more innovation and technology to push down the costs for truly scalable adoption that will lead us to a more realistic goal of net zero. Next slide, please. From the previous slide, from these areas that will help us reach net zero, we prioritize technologies around low carbon hydrogen, low carbon fuels, battery and energy storage, and carbon management. These technologies are key to unlocking GHG abatement in sectors like mining, like oil and gas, forestry, agriculture, manufacturing, and transportation. We support technologies that are at the TRL level of 4 to 9 or technology readiness level of 4 to 9. To put it simply, we're supporting the validation of technology out of the lab with a partner or potential customer in a pilot or early stage demonstration. So that is the key kind of profile of what we're looking for in a project that CICE would fund. Next slide, please. So in particular, this is what CICE funds based on our guided mandate. Companies must be Canadian and must show a BC presence with the development of their technology and or innovation. So ensure you're already incorporated in Canada before applying to CICE. We fund the validation of technology out of the lab into an environment with the potential partner and customer. So ensure this is leading to real technological advancement for the company. Finally, there must be a path to commercialization. Many of our companies go on to receive venture capital and other more mature forms of debt, equity, and grant funding. Ensure you have a reasonable business model and market penetration strategy that is as sustainable as the technology that you're proposing to the organization. Next slide, please. So here are our main areas of focus. These are our priorities. By no means are these the sole opportunities that we're looking at CICE. I'm going to start with the top left-hand corner, which is low carbon bio and synthetic fuels. In that specific segment, we are looking at advanced biofuels, so technology and business model innovation to diversify feedstocks and integrate value chains for advanced biofuel production with an identified customer. We're also looking at biocarbon, so conversion technologies that accelerate the commercial production of biocarbon products into biochar, bio-oil, syngas, and other identified markets. Moving over to low carbon hydrogen, there we are focused predominantly on promoting hydrogen end use. So the use of hydrogen, hydrogen derivatives, and co-products of hydrogen production in applications that de-risk hydrogen adoption and creates demand, specifically for industry. Finally, as we move slightly lower to battery and energy storage on the bottom right-hand side, we're looking at performance and sustainability. So really looking at innovation solutions that boost the competitiveness and sustainability of battery and energy storage systems by enhancing operational performance, safety, supply chain processes, and reducing environmental impact through reuse, upcycling, and recycling through the value chain. And then finally, on the bottom left, we have carbon management. Within that portfolio, we are prioritizing solutions across the value chain that address predictive modeling, early detection, and land management, firefighting, spread halting, fire-resistant materials, increased forest and community resilience, and other wildfire innovation technologies and practices within the wildfire space. So these, again, are our priority areas. They're by no means the only technologies we will focus on, but they will be held in high standard in terms of what we will be looking to fund in these three focus areas. Next slide, please. So I'll be going through the timeline for the February 2025 call, very similar to our previous calls in terms of timeline, but I'll just highlight exactly the dates you need to be aware of as we go through this call. Next slide, please. We are currently accepting expressions of interest on our website at cice.ca under funding opportunities until April 30th, 2025 at 5 p.m. Pacific time. The expressions of interest consist of a brief opportunity description and a video of up to 5 minutes in length, noting anything above 5 minutes will not be reviewed by CICE. Stage 1 evaluations from the expression of interests will occur and conclude on May 15th, 2025, at which point all candidates will be made aware of where they sit in their status, and they'll be sent an email informed of their status moving forward to Stage 2. Stage 2 is where we request a detailed proposal. So the detailed proposal phase usually takes about a month to complete, and that will be completed on June 12th, 2025 at 5 p.m. Pacific time again. This consists of a 25-page document where the company will highlight details around the project and the company as well, both in terms of project success and company commercialization. The detailed due diligence will take place in the month of June, and the investment committee meeting will be held in July 2025. And this will get us a full understanding of what companies would be able to move to stage 3 of our process, which is the project funding agreement process. So candidates that are successful in advancing to stage 3 will be made aware on August 2025. So next slide, please. So I'm going to go through some common questions that we get from the intake usually, as well as some new questions that have arisen through the recent outreach to the community. Next slide, please. The first main question and most important question, probably what people ask, is what does a project look like? We don't have specific mandates, but we have recommendations. And so the recommendation here is average funding per project is around $700,000 per project. Projects are limited to a length of 2 years, and projects must start within 6 months of signing a contribution agreement. So if we go back to our timeline, the project funding agreements are expected to be signed in August of 2025. So your project will have to start 6 months from that date. This, just to reiterate, is reimbursement-based project funding. So all allocations will be made to the project itself. Next slide, please. So when can we use the funding? Again, to reiterate from the previous slide, the funding incurred after signing the funding agreement is what we focus on for CICE funding. So any costs incurred after August or during or after August 2025 is what would be covered by our project funding agreement. Only project costs are eligible for reimbursement by CICE. CICE does not provide general and corporate funding. So all of the costs that will be submitted for reimbursement have to directly be attributed to the project that you are applying with. Next slide, please. Are there stacking limits or leverage funding requirements? So CICE prides itself on being very flexible, very conducive to the startup culture within BC and the rest of Canada. So we don't have strict stacking limits at all. In fact, we have no stacking rules for CICE. what we've seen within our portfolio companies is an average funding coming from CICE consisting of about 50% of total project costs. So we do request that companies have some skin in the game. They do need to provide some capital. We would like other participants to be part of the project funding because that shows either belief or adoption within the technology. But by no means is CICE shy from covering more than those costs, as well as providing less than 50% of costs, depending on the project and the impact that it has in BC. So again, no strict mandate around that, just a mere recommendation around the fact that we fund about 50% of project costs. Next slide, please. So in terms of how many applications can we submit and who can submit, again, as dictated by the mandate that I had previously mentioned, we are mainly looking for submissions from Canadian companies to apply for funding from us. Priority will be given to those companies with a BC presence. That is a mandate for CICE. So Canadian companies can also submit on behalf of a consortium. So if you're looking to implement a technology from outside of Canada, but this is a new innovation and first of its kind implementation in Canada, that is going to further the TRL level. We would be open to seeing other companies that we could fund, but again, it has to be on behalf of a Canadian company. So only Canadian companies can apply for CICE funding. Next slide, please. So that's it. That's all we have here in terms of the call. Again, CICE is an open book. We're looking to engage with the community. We want to understand what innovation is out there. You can see the info@cice.ca email down there. Please reach out to us if you have any further questions or you want to see if your project could be eligible. We understand kind of any concerns around what could be eligible to us, but we specify that, again, these have to be Canadian companies. There has to be some type of technology readiness level enhancement. So preferably we look at least 1 to 2 levels of increase in technology readiness. And the final part of this is we're not just looking at the technology in isolation, we're looking for commercialization. And so we need to understand both the project, the technology, and the business model that will help you unlock a path to scalability, a path to commercialization, and a path to adoption from the customers that you work with. So that is all for me from this webinar. Again, if you have any more questions, please go to our website, please reach out to us, and we'd be happy to engage with you up until that date of April 30th, 2025. Thank you so much and take care.